I think no matter how you look at this week's episode of Seventh Time Loop, it's bad news. Like, while it's probably not going to be yet again another bad ending where Riche dies, and, whether that's because of Arnold stabbing her or collateral from the war that Arnold will end up making, no matter what, black powder is being introduced, which, could be used to help protect, but once one person has it, no matter if they want to spread it to other nations or not, other people will look at it, they'll create it, and bigger wars, more deadly wars will happen. The biggest concern right now isn't about whether or not we can prevent it from being used. It's happening no matter what. It's more so like we have a character who has no compassion for the lives that he will be indirectly responsible for. It's an interesting moral dilemma. If someone makes a weapon, is it that person who then ends up killing because everyone uses it as such? But essentially, in this case, it's not really a more gray outcome. It's pretty black or white. This is a guy who just sees no wrong. I mean, granted, his upbringing skewed his perception of the world. I get why he turned out like this, but to be able to know and be told to your face, this is something that would destroy the world, and he's like, I really want to see that. I want to see where this thing that is most likely going to kill people, what it will do in the future. What's wrong? And I'm just like, the fact that she said that both times that she's interacted with him in her previous lives, she was unable to convince him otherwise. I don't know what's different about this third time other than Arnold himself, because let's just say he does end up presenting it to him, and he's like, I don't agree with how you look at the world. Then he would just find someone else to give it to, right? So it's like, we gotta give it to Arnold, but it's like, can we save his soul? It kind of feels like worst case scenario. Either way though, I have a full live reaction to this week's episode of 7th Time Loop over on my Patreon. If you want to see my full length of thoughts to this or any of these episodes, it's over there if you're interested. The politics in this show have gotten spicy, and I love a good political story, and this one is scratching an itch not many can satisfy. At least, you might see one or two a year that really get into that thick political story without really relying on a lot of gimmicks. And the most brilliant thing about her having lived 6 lives previous to the 7th is the fact that, it's not always like, oh, she's known this character 6 times over. In this case, this is her 3rd time meeting him. So she'll have some experience and a little leeway and kind of understanding of how to navigate certain things, but there's a lot of new scenarios, and most importantly, the person who she thought was pure unfiltered evil is someone that she can now recognize he isn't like that, so now we have to figure out how to make it so he doesn't go to war or get roped into things that aren't bad. Gunpowder, black power it seems useful. If you give him that in response to say, hey, here's this thing, we protect this kingdom in return, maybe they supply it, that's where we'll manufacture it. There's a way to keep them safe, but it's like, the worry at this point isn't even about Kyle, which I thought it was, you know what I mean? Really, if you look at last week and the way most people seemingly were talking about it was like, okay, we have this sickly prince who's doing everything in his power to protect his kingdom. In this episode, he literally says to our girl, I don't even care if he's evil and just the worst person ever, I have no choice but to get help from him. That's the situation he's in. He is a genuinely good dude, and you want to see him succeed, and then this episode just sideswipes you with the harbinger of death, and it reminds you that the individual stories that are at play sometimes aren't even the main focus, when in actuality it's this professor who I thought was going to be a more just character, not really someone who could look at the face of the future and say, I'm really interested. The fact that his father seemed like a piece of garbage, don't get twisted, but when you as a kid can listen into scientists being like, he has no remorse, he created something that will just kill people and literally can't comprehend what he's doing, and then you just see it all burn, he is emotionally stunted. I feel like because of that childhood, it just stopped growing, he stopped maturing with that, and he's just pure unfiltered logic of, it'll be interesting because technically it's true. It will be interesting to see how the world will evolve when that is incorporated to the masses. That is true. But you lack empathy. You lack human compassion there. And it's like, what is the play? Last week I was like, what the hell are they going to do that's going to supply this kingdom with a reason to function? That doesn't even seem important anymore. It's probably the powder, mind you, but that's no longer even important. It's we need to make sure this dude sticks with our kingdom Because should we work this out, the last thing we want is this psycho to go spread his knowledge throughout the lands with no, like, hey, I have a casual idea for a nuclear bomb. I'm just going to give it to someone because I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Like, that's kind of the character we're dealing with. And it's actually surprisingly freaky. I wasn't ready for this. Like, I legitimately was not ready for what they did with the professor. Because usually, like, when Riche's talking about, like, oh yeah, like, I knew them from my fourth life or the second life, this, that, and whatever. Like, even with how she was last week, I didn't really get the impression that, like, oh, I'm going to be fearful of this man. That changed with this episode. I don't think we've reached another bad ending. I don't think this is going to become 8th time loop the Villainess. But no matter how this goes, I just don't see myself coming out of this saying, oh, the professor has had a change of heart and he'll be more careful going forward. If anything, I think the best case we could hope for is that the professor works for us. He won't go spread his knowledge to just anyone because it's fun. He'll make sure he talks to us first. Like, that's the best we could hope for at this point, but I really don't know. The good news is that Riche is seemingly in some sort of, like, contract or partnership with Kyle, which kind of makes sense, working together to make sure we can figure out a solution. At least he's not dying. There's a silver lining there. Her pills and medicine, despite apparently not tasting good, are working and keeping his body functioning properly, which is nice. And I really don't think the professor's like one of these characters who does it because he's evil and wants people to die. It's just this very scary thought of someone so intelligent and curious, and because didn't have a proper upbringing, is so stunted with his emotional growth that he's just pure intelligence that says, I want to make this and see what happens. And it's like, usually with a character like this, who would be developing something that would potentially harm more and more people, they would say, I understand that this could be used and probably will be used in wrong hands, but it will at the very least protect certain people. He doesn't really have that. It's just about, I want to see what happens. It's not about saving or protecting and justifying that, we'll save this even if we lose it. It's just, he's actually freaky, if I'm being honest. I'm sure some people will disagree and say, whatever they're going to say. Some people, I'm sure, will say, oh, they completely agree with his mindset or this, that. I can't, man. Like, this dude actually surprised me in the worst way, but, like, it makes for a hell of a good arc. But let me know what you thought of this episode. I definitely think this was one of the most shocking for sure, and, honestly, Riche's face at the end said it all. But let me know what you're feeling down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here. Of course, ring that bell so you get notified when I upload more. And like I mentioned, we have that full live reaction over on my Patreon. And hey, while you're over there, I'll also give you a video shout out. So today we have Michelle Evelyn Mears, Mike Pye, Golden Dragon, Samuel Crumb, Jermaine Paul Hulu, and Joe Gaming Axe. So I appreciate the support, everyone. Please take care. Have a good one.